Howdy friends, I'm Joel Empey, and welcome to another episode of Joel Empey Talks NFL, and on today's episode, we're going to look at fantasy football advice for Week 6, waiver wire streaming targets that you need to go after. We're going to talk about my top bets of the week for Week 6, suicide picks for Week 6, must-watch games for Week 6, but first, we're going to start with the things that I learned from Week 5 in the NFL. So the first two things that I learned in Week 5 come from our Thursday night matchup with the Seahawks taking on the Rams. It was just an incredible game. Russell Wilson, to me, proved that he's the front runner for the MVP, particularly after the last 2 weeks where Patrick Mahomes has fallen back a little bit in terms of his production and success this season. So Russell Wilson right now, front runner for MVP in my opinion. He's had a truly heroic season so far. And then my other big takeaway from that game on Thursday night is that Gerald Everett is a beast, man. He might be what the Rams need to get back on track. He might be the offensive piece that they need to start funneling the ball more often in order for them to win games. I know he got funneled the ball a lot in that game and they lost, but his toughness and durability and his just willingness to try to get yards after the catch was just something really special to watch. He's a tough runner after the catch. I think that he could be a key player for the Rams moving forward. Now, another big takeaway I have from Week 5 is that the Packers are definitely a very, very good football team. One of the top 2 or 3 teams in the NFC, without a doubt. But we still haven't seen a really complete game from them yet, and that concerns me. That's why I can't crown them as the best team in the NFC currently. They really didn't have a good pass defense in the second half against the Cowboys, which has been the stronger part of their defense so far this year. And their pass offense has not gotten going at all, except for the one game when they played the Eagles. And obviously they didn't win that game, and they saw a massive decline in their ability to pass the ball once Devontae Adams was knocked out of that game. Now, the Eagles have one of the worst secondaries in the NFL, so to put up passing yards against them is not that impressive of a task. So we haven't seen the Packers pass offense really shine yet this season, and that concerns me, and that's why I can't rank them as the best team in the NFC, although they are clearly very, very good. Solid W against the Cowboys this past weekend. My next takeaway is that the Ravens are in trouble. Lamar Jackson clearly can't play the position of quarterback very well against any kind of a good defense. You know, the first 2 weeks were just honeymoon dream matchups for the Ravens as they got to take on the Dolphins and the Cardinals. Since then, Lamar Jackson has proven that, you know, he doesn't have that good of an arm, which is something that we all thought we knew about him before this season began. But the real issue for the Ravens is that I feel like they need Lamar Jackson to play really well in order for them to be a legitimate contender this year. That defense is not the exact same shutdown defense that it was last year. They have a lot more holes in it. So the Ravens are in serious trouble if they can't start playing just lights out A+ defense, or if Lamar Jackson, you know, can't step up and play like a true high level quarterback. And the last thing I learned from Week 5 in the NFL is just that, man, damn, Michael Thomas is a good wide receiver. Like, he doesn't, to the naked eye, when you look at Michael Thomas, you know, he doesn't have the, you know, size of a Julio Jones or an AJ Green or, you know, one of those specimen wide receivers that's so great out wide. And then he doesn't have the high-end speed of like a Tyreek Hill, or John Ross, Marquise Goodwin. He doesn't have that top-end speed, and then he also doesn't have that high-end size. So it's just easy to overlook him as one of the NFL's most elite wide receivers. But when you see him, his toughness once he has the ball, you know, he's a surprisingly strong guy that's surprisingly hard to tackle. He has sneaky speed. His route running is just so precise that he can get open. Even with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, Michael Thomas is one of the top 5 wide receivers in the NFL. And Bridgewater's ability to get Michael Thomas involved in the game, mixed with how good that defense is playing, you know, they still have Kamara that's going to, if you try to stop Thomas, Kamara's going to scorch you. So I really believe that the Saints, even with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, are the number 1 team in the NFC. If Drew Brees was not coming back at all this year, I would still rank them the number 1 team in the NFC. The fact that they're going to have Drew Brees come back is just shocking to what the potential of this Saints team that, has really gotten screwed the last 2 years en route to a Super Bowl. And it really looked like when Breeze got injured this year, it really looked like the window was maybe closing for the Saints and their ability to have a real Super Bowl run left in the tank. But Bridgewater winning as many games as he has, the team looking as good as they have looked, knowing that Drew Brees is going to be back, probably in, just a few weeks, probably around week 10. I mean, the sky's the limit for the Saints right now. They're my front runner in the NFC and my top Super Bowl contender coming from the NFC at the moment. Looking at my must-watch games coming up for Week 6 in the NFL, my number one must-watch game is the Chiefs versus the Texans. Mahomes has looked off for the last 2 weeks, and last week, Watson showed off. So this is just going to be a matchup of probably the two most exciting quarterbacks in the NFL in Watson and Mahomes going head to head. It's the Chiefs' chance to get back on track after a couple of rocky performances and a tough loss last week. And it's the Texans' chance to really prove that they are one of the elite contenders in the AFC like they think they are. So this is going to be an intense matchup. Winner could be the number 2 team in the AFC behind the Patriots in my eyes. My number 2 must-watch game for Week 6 in the NFL is the Lions taking on the Packers on Monday Night Football. It's going to be electric, guaranteed. It's the Lions' big opportunity to prove that they are a legit contender in the NFC North. They're getting 2 weeks to prepare for this game since they're coming off of a bye week and it being on a Monday night. They get another extra day to prepare for this one. Meanwhile, the Packers are going to try to improve to 3-0 in their division. They've already got wins over the Bears and the Vikings. So this is their chance to go on an early sweep of the division, 3-0, and to prove that they're not just the best team in the NFC North, but perhaps the best team in all of the NFC. My number 3 must-watch game for Week 6 is the Vikings and the Eagles. This is going to be another chance for Kirk Cousins to get back on track and for the Vikings to erase those storylines of the fact that they've been inept in the passing game up until this past weekend. The Giants were obviously a very exposable team for the Vikings last week, and the Eagles have a very exposable secondary. So this is going to be another chance for the Vikings to prove that they can throw the ball adequately, and it's also going to be a chance for the Vikings to prove for the first time this year that they are capable of beating an elite team. So far, all their wins have come against very subpar teams. Anytime they've had to play a good team, they have not looked good so far this season. And that's been the storyline with the Vikings with Kirk Cousins at the helm, is just that they can't beat the big teams in the big moments. And I think the Eagles are a big team, and this is a big moment. So that's going to be an exciting one to see if the Vikings can rise to the occasion. All right, here are my top suicide survivor locks of the week. There's only a few of them this week. This is actually a tough week. This is one where if you can get through this week, it's going to be a lot more smooth sailing going forward. A lot of people are going to die off this week, I really believe. So if you still have the Patriots, use them now. Use them against the Giants. That's a guaranteed win for the Patriots, and there's not very many guarantees this weekend. The other guarantee, the number 2 guarantee, is the Cowboys over the Jets. Now, there's a good chance you've already used the Patriots and the Cowboys, so neither of these picks are going to help you. But those, if you haven't used either of those teams yet, use one of them now. Those are both guaranteed wins. And my third choice that I'm going to go with here is one that I don't even feel 100% confident on, but I do feel the most confident of all the remaining games that this team is going to get a win, and that's the Ravens over the Bengals. The Bengals have just obviously been not very good. They're one of the few winless teams that's remaining in the NFL, one of the 4 winless teams. Although I think the Dolphins are clearly by far the worst of those 4 remaining teams, and then the Jets and then the Redskins. Then the Bengals are probably the best of those 4 0-4 teams, 0-5 teams. Yeah, winless teams, let's call them. So I definitely like the Ravens' chances here, but the Ravens have not been so hot over the last couple of weeks, so I'm a little bit apprehensive. But if you've already used the Patriots and the Cowboys, the Ravens should be your safest bet for your suicide survivor lock of the week going into Week 6. All right, looking into best bets for Week 6 in the NFL, number 1 bet right now is Carolina versus Tampa Bay under 48.5 points. I just feel like this is a guaranteed low-scoring game. I said that last week about the game in London, and the Raiders disproved me in that one. But I'm feeling confident once again in London. Those games are always a little bit lower scoring. It's an away game for both teams, so nobody has the comforts of home behind them. Everybody's coming off of the jet lag, air travel that diminishes your ability to perform. Then you have to look at Tampa has the number one run defense in the NFL. The last time that these two teams played was in week 2. And the Buccaneers did a phenomenal job of limiting Christian McCaffrey in that game. I just feel like if the Panthers can't use Christian McCaffrey, which he was obviously a little bit cramped up at the end of the game here this past weekend, and the fact that the Buccaneers have such a strong run defense makes me believe that they're not going to be able to use McCaffrey, the Panthers. And if they can't use McCaffrey really well, what is the upside of the Panthers' offense? I just feel like they're not going to be able to score very well. The Panthers defensively have been really good against Jameis Winston in general throughout his entire career. The game last time in week 2 was 20-14. The over-under in this game is 48.5 points. So they only scored 34 in the last time that these teams played. I could see it being a little bit higher scoring, like 24-20 in favor of Carolina is what I would loosely project on that game, which would equal out to be 44 points, would still be under what the over-under is for this weekend. So I'm just feeling like Carolina's going to have a hard time scoring with how good Tampa's run defense is. Tampa's going to have a hard time scoring with how good the Panthers defense has been lately and with their familiarity with Jameis Winston. So I'm thinking that this one is definitely going to be an under. The next bet I want to talk about is the Eagles plus 130 in money line over the Vikings. To be frank, the Vikings, I just don't believe that they can beat a really good football team, and I do believe that the Eagles are a really good football team. So that's just the frank and concise way to put the reason why I like the Eagles in this one. Now, I understand you might say the Eagles secondary, not so good. So, Kirk Cousins, who just had a good passing week, maybe he can expose that secondary a little bit. But the issue with that is that the front seven on the Eagles is really good. And that Vikings offense needs to get going behind Dalvin Cook, who's been one of the most efficient runners in the NFL this season. Now, front seven of the Eagles being as good as it is, I think they're going to be able to bottle up Dalvin Cook and also get after Kirk Cousins with the pass rush, which those are the two ways that you need to beat the Vikings. You need to slow down Dalvin Cook, and you need to get in the face of Kirk Cousins, because when Kirk is under pressure, he does not make good throws. I believe that the Eagles are going to easily be able to do those two things, slow down Dalvin Cook and get in the pressure on Kirk Cousins. So I really just think that mixed with the fact that the Vikings, I don't think they have what it takes to beat a really good football team. And I think the Eagles are a really good football team. So I love the Eagles. I can't believe that they're underdogs in this one. I mean, I can kind of believe it because the Vikings are at home. But I think the Eagles as underdogs is just an amazing bet. If you want to take the spread, go ahead and take the spread. It's 3 points. But I love the money line. Eagles plus 130 against the Vikings. Now, this next bet is probably actually my lock of the week. Saints -1 versus Jacksonville. That's insanity, man. The Saints have been so good with Bridgewater, undefeated with Bridgewater at the helm. And with Bridgewater at the helm, they've already beaten the Seahawks and the Cowboys. They've beaten much better teams than the Jaguars. Sure, the Jaguars are a good team, and Minshew has that bit of magic to him, that Minshew magic. But the fact that they're barely favored, like a 1-point favorite, is almost a pick 'em. Like they're practically a pick 'em against the Jaguars. It's the line shouldn't be like that. It should be 3-4 points. The fact that it's only 1 point makes this a must attack bet. I love the Saints -1 versus the Jaguars. That's my lock of the week betting wise. Now my last bet of the week is the Cowboys -8.5 versus the Jets. It just blows my mind that this isn't at least a double-digit spread. I just don't see any way that the Cowboys don't cover 8.5. The Jets are a bottom 3 team in the NFL, maybe even bottom 2 team in the NFL right now. I don't even care if Sam Darnold's back or not. And if you look at how the Cowboys have done against the lower ranked teams, like they've already played the Dolphins and the Redskins. So I would say the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Redskins are the bottom three teams in the NFL, with the Bengals being the fourth worst. And they beat the Dolphins by 25 points. They beat the Redskins by 10 points. I think that they're going to beat the Jets by somewhere in the middle there, somewhere between 10 and 25 points. I don't see any way that this isn't at least a double-digit win for the Cowboys. And I just frankly can't believe that the Cowboys are only favored by 8.5 going into this one. I know that they have had two kind of off weeks in a row here. The Cowboys against the Saints, they weren't able to get the offense going, but that was in New Orleans. New Orleans, had a very savvy game plan for that one. And then against the Packers this past week, I mean, in the second half, the Cowboys looked really good. They didn't have a smart game plan. They kind of coached themselves out of both of those games, to be honest. I think that they could have won them both if they would have just had better coaching, better play calling in those games. And those are against, I think the Saints are the number one team in the NFC, and the Packers are probably the number two team in the NFC. So you're going to tell me that the Cowboys, can play the two best teams in the NFC extremely close, but they're going to only win by 8.5 points against the second worst team in the entire NFL. I just am not buying it. I see the Cowboys winning this game easily by double digits. 8.5 points. You have to hammer the Cowboys. All right, guys, now it's time for fantasy talk, and I don't think there's really any standout running back wide receivers this past week. There's sure a couple of guys that I could maybe mention to go after in waivers if you're trying to stream some guys, but I'm just going to leave running backs and wide receivers out of it for this week, and we're just going to talk about quarterbacks, tight ends, and defenses, and really focus on the streaming game. So my number one quarterback to stream this week is Kyle Allen. I know he had the one good week, and then he's had two not so impressive fantasy weeks. But this week coming up, he's taking on the Buccaneers, who in their last 3 games have given up, most recently to Bridgewater, 314 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 pick. 2 weeks ago against Goff, 517 yards, 2 touchdowns, 3 picks. And then 3 weeks ago, Danny Dimes puts up 336 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, and 2 rushing touchdowns. So the Bucs are just hemorrhaging points to the quarterback position right now. If Kyle Allen can put up anywhere near the kind of numbers that those guys have put up, which, you want to say maybe Jared Goff is an elite quarterback, although I wouldn't say that. Teddy Bridgewater, obviously not considered an elite quarterback. And Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones, obviously, that was his first start in his NFL career, and he was able to put up 336, 2 touchdowns, and 2 rushing touchdowns, no picks. So the Buccaneers are hemorrhaging points right now to not the best quarterbacks, middling quarterbacks, and I think Kyle Allen is a middling quarterback, to be fair. I don't think he's a great quarterback, but I think against this horrendous Tampa Bay Buccaneers pass defense, I was saying earlier, Christian McCaffrey is going to have a harder day because this Bucs run defense is the best in the league, and I am guaranteeing you that the Bucs are going to dare Kyle Allen to beat him with their arms to win this game. They are going to do everything to stop McCaffrey, and they are going to do everything to leave their secondary as exposable as possible. I just think that Kyle Allen is a shoe-in to finish as a top 12 guy this week. I don't think his upside is top 5, but I think he's a shoe-in to be in the top 12. Now, the next quarterback I want to talk about is Kirk Cousins. There's not going to be a ton of weeks where Kirk is going to have real obvious playability in fantasy football, but last week was one, and this week is another. He's going up against Philadelphia, who has one of the most exposable, if not the most exposable secondary in the entire NFL, and they have such a strong front seven and a good offense in their own right that the Vikings are going to have to throw the ball in this one. Obviously, Thielen and Diggs are guys that can exploit a weak secondary, and the Eagles are going to put up points of their own, so the Vikings are going to need to score points, and if they want to win this game, they can't just play it safe the whole way through, and that front seven of the Eagles is going to slow down Dalvin Cook, like they slowed down Aaron Jones, Kerryon Johnson. Everybody thought Kerryon Johnson was not going to pan out as a running back this year because he had to play the Eagles and didn't look good. And we've seen since then, Kerryon's been a lot better. This Eagles front seven is very good against the run. So Kirk is going to have to throw the ball in this one. I think he's a very safe floor and a high ceiling. I'm only going to mention one tight end this week, and he's the guy who I would go after with my top waiver priority this week, without a doubt, and that's Gerald Everett. I think he really showed himself as the top receiving tight end on the team, and I really think the Rams need to do something to revamp their offense that hasn't been as dynamic this year as they have been in previous years. They haven't been, the Patriots exposed them in the Super Bowl last year, and they need to alter their approach if they want to be really successful this year. And I think Gerald Everett can be a guy that they can run the offense through. I'm not saying run the entire offense through, but feed him numerous targets a game like they did most recently. And he's proven to them that he's a guy you can rely on for trying to be tough and grind for those extra few yards. Every time he got the ball in his hands, he looked like a running back. He was just looking to make yards after contact, to get yards after the catch as soon as the ball hit him in the hands. He was fighting for every single foot that he could. I think that Everett might be able to work his way into being a consistent tight end option. And right now, there's maybe 8 guys total that you can actually rely on at the tight end position. So if we can find another guy that could be a reliable starter, then that's a guy that you really need to target, unless if you have one of those top 8 guys. So I think Gerald Everett is a must target this week. He's my top waiver wire target for the week. He could be a tight end that you can just stream, for a little while, or he could end up being an actual starter for you for the rest of the season. That kind of value means that he should definitely be your top waiver priority this week, unless, of course, if you have one of the top 8 guys. Now, my top defensive streamer for this week is actually the Washington Redskins. I know you might be thinking, even against how bad the Dolphins are, you can't start the Redskins. You can start the Redskins against the Dolphins. The Dolphins are actually that bad. They've had 2 weeks to prepare to lose this game, and I think that they're going to do just that. And really, you might be thinking that this is a game that you just want to stay away from because both teams are just so terrible that you don't know who's going to out-terrible the other. I'm telling you, the Dolphins are going to out-terrible the Redskins easily in this one. In the Redskins defense actually isn't that bad. They're obviously not a great defense. They're probably still a bottom 10 defense, but they're towards the higher part of that bottom 10 defenses. And even last week, they sacked Brady 4 times and intercepted him once. If they can get 4 sacks and 1 pick against Tom Brady and the Patriots, imagine what they can do to the Dolphins. I think that they're a guaranteed top 12 play this week. And the nice thing about the Redskins is that they are guaranteed available on your waiver wire. Just because they played the Patriots last week, nobody has them on their team. Guaranteed top 12 fantasy finishing defense for this week that's guaranteed on your waiver wire. You got to go after the Redskins. And the other defense that I want to talk about is the Pittsburgh Steelers defense. They've looked really good, actually, over the last 2 weeks, especially since they've added Minkah Fitzpatrick to that team. They always had the pass rush, so they've always been good at getting after the quarterback and getting you sacks. But adding Minkah Fitzpatrick to the backside of that defense has really helped out the secondary. And, they already had good corners, but to have that really reliable safety play to pair with their good corners and the good pass rush, the Steelers defense has been really quality over the last couple of weeks. They have multiple turnovers, at least 5 sacks in their last 2 games, and they're coming up against the Chargers this week, who were just horrible last week. I mean, it's not their fault. They are just decimated with injuries. That team is more injury prone than any team I've ever seen before. And the Broncos last week, who, have struggled defensively all season. I think that they're probably a middling defensive team, but they have struggled defensively all season. And they had a great showing against the Chargers last week. I just think the Steelers are definitely a much better defense than the Broncos. So if you thought the Broncos did well last week, which they did, I expect the Steelers are going to do even better next week. All right, so that does it for this episode of Joel Empey Talks NFL. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please comment below any questions or inquiries you might have regarding anything that I said during the show. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel. Follow me on Twitter at Empey Talks, somewhere down here. And until next time, cheers, friends.